that button right now, so you'll be getting that notification. I just want to add, make sure everybody is aware that the hopefully we'll be programming for state branded managers as well at the NAMO conference. That was a really big success. So we hope you can invite more people to come. We really enjoyed having state branded managers with us last year. Thought they were a great addition to the whole conference, not just the day that was planned for them. So really encourage everyone to do that. All right. So just a little housekeeping. We will be having three states present today. And after those presentations, we'll ask those presentations to be 15 to 20 minutes. And then after that, we're going to open it up for sharing. If you have something great you want to add, questions you want to ask our presenters or anybody on the a call. We want this to be collaborative. This the whole point of NAMO is to share and take what you can back to your states. So I highly encourage you just to jump right in there after our presenters. If you want to take notes on your questions or put them in the chat, that's fine. And we'll let those presenters answer in the chat if they want to, and then we'll address those again at the end. But we'll keep all of those interactive questions till the end of our three presentations, if that's all right. So while I load a presentation, I'm going to let my colleague Hannah McGee, who did all the work for this from Illinois Department of Agriculture, introduce our first speaker.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Hannah, if you haven't already met me. If you did meet me, I was the girl with the service dog last July. That'll help put the face to the person, probably. The dog almost always connects me. So our first presenter is Karen from the Maryland Department of Agriculture. And Karen, since she is in Maryland, she can only stay for an hour with us today because she is so far ahead of us in time zone. So she will not be with us for the open discussion. However, if you have any questions, I'll have you guys email them to me, or Karen has her contact information in her presentation as well. I'll turn it over to you, Karen.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. And yeah, thank you for doing my PowerPoint. I do appreciate that. So if you could bring it up. So I am Karen Fedor. I am the administrator. So I don't see it.
I don't see the PowerPoint either, Mary.
Okay. Yeah, working on that. Just a second. Sorry about that.
You're fine.
So anyways, a little bit about myself. I am with the Maryland Department of Agriculture, as mentioned. I am the administrator for the Farm and Food Program. I am in the marketing office within the Maryland Department of Agriculture. I have yet to be in NAAMO, but with it being so close to New Jersey, so hopefully I'll be able to make it. I know my colleague, Kristen, was there last year, and she was already talking about it within our office. So it's very exciting. Now that Joe had mentioned that there's a whale watching tour, I was like, that's really exciting. So I just wanted to bring a snapshot about Maryland Department of Agriculture, because when I saw that Texas is on, the Texas is there, I was like, okay, let's put things into perspective about specialty crop, block grant, and Maryland. So we are a very tiny state, actually probably maybe landmass. I don't know how it compares to New Jersey, but anyways, our farmers do have, their markets are within, 2.5 hours to 2 to 3 major metropolitans area between DC, Baltimore, Philly, and New York City. We have the Chesapeake Bay. As you can see on the map, what we do within Maryland, it's always farming within the context of the Chesapeake Bay. And so we have very rigorous nutrient management plans that our farms are required to submit every year in terms of their inputs. And so sometimes that can be a competitive disadvantage to the surrounding states. But, again, we farm in the context of the Chesapeake Bay, because that's what we do. And it is very much part of our livelihood within Maryland. Next slide. Oh, can you go to the next slide? There you go. Great. So, our land mass is small, as I said. We only have acres in farm, 1.9 million acres in farmland. And the number of farms, we're looking at 12,000 farms. And then our average size farm is 158 acres. So that's just to give you some context of like the size of Maryland and the type of farming that we do. Next slide. Okay. So then when we look at specialty crops, right? So poultry and grain is our number, when you're looking at the ag census, poultry and grain, they're our number one in terms of sales. And so then we look at, well, what's the next, right? So then our greenhouse floriculture nursery, it ranks one, that's in terms of specialty crops. So that's our number one sales. But then, third overall in terms of agriculture within Maryland. And then it gets lower down on the list. And so you'll see from the spreadsheet in terms of the number of farms that we have, remember, we only have 12,000 farms, but then when it gets into specialty crops, it's very condensed. So then we have, the vegetable, melons, potatoes, and sweet potatoes. It's number two. And then the overall ag sales is fifth in the state. And then we get the fruits, nuts, and berries, which is third for specialty crop. And then it's eighth overall. And then the treehouse, we do have a very small treehouse industry. You say it's fourth, but then overall for overall sales, ag sales, it's 14th. Again, this is all based on the census. Next slide. Great. So again, the formula for, if you're familiar with specialty crop block grant, the formula is based on cash receipts. So then we get a little over, approximately the amount of money by the time we take out our indirect is a little close to like $400,000. And that's part of the competitive grant cycle. So on an annual basis, so we don't have a whole lot of money. So we got to make do with what we have. So then on an annual basis, we receive between 12 to 14 proposals per year. And the funding request is approximately $900,000. I will say because of the RFSI grant, I also administer the RFSI grant, we actually saw over $1 million of requests last year. And I think just because the grants were on people's minds just because of RFSI last year, we'll see what happens this year in terms of how many applications come in. We're in the middle of revising some of our specialty crop application online. So we have not announced our grants yet, which we hope to do. I hope to do it probably the second week of February. And so how we run our grant is there is no maximum request that folks can send in, and there is a minimum request of $15,000. And then our funding priorities is that we have to do a survey every 3 years to determine our funding priorities, but consistently we have seen that market enhancement, food safety compliance, and research have been the top 3 funding priorities for Maryland. Next slide, please. Okay, so when I was asked to, Maryland does we do have several state-led projects. And so I just want to talk to you a little bit about that. And how we run our process is the Maryland Department of Agriculture, we do submit our grant applications as part of the competitive grant process. So our folks within marketing, our food safety is within, some states call it grading, but we call it here the food quality assurance program. And then also our plant industry. So what they'll do is they'll submit a grant, a competitive grant, just like all the other grants that, applications that come in. And then they are scored and ranked just like any other proposals. And so then the grant review committee makes the recommendations to the Secretary of Agriculture, and then the secretary either revises or approves the recommendations. The type of people we have on our grant committee, we have between 5 to 7, depending on what their schedule is, but it ranges from Farm Bureau to economic development to, in Maryland, we have what is called county agricultural marketing professionals. So they're very similar to what an ag marketing specialist might be on the state level, but we have those in individual counties, which are paid for through the county itself. So we have one of those. We have somebody from urban ag, and then we also have somebody from rural development. on the committee. So what we try to do is get a mixture of folks, like as we're required to do through specialty crop. We do not have anyone from the Maryland Department of Agriculture on the grant review committee. I am the staff person, and I just play the neutral. I am the neutral component to that, and I just make sure, the applications are scored and ranked accordingly, and they follow the procedures as outlined by USDA. All right, next slide, please. So, historically, historically we've seen usually the state-led projects have been from our marketing department, as I said, the food quality assurance, and our plant industry. Now, Maryland's Best is the state branded program that we have within Maryland. That particular program has been getting money from specialty crops since probably around 2005, since when they revised the formula for specialty crop. So that's been consistently like over almost a little over under 20 years. And then our food safety program, again, is what I'll go more into details regarding GAP and GIP, and then also our apiary inspection program. Next slide, please. So with our Maryland's Best program, again, as I said, it's our state branded program. And so within Maryland, as you can see previously from the slides, it's a very small, dense, I like that word, Joe, that you said, in terms of agriculture. But 2 out of the 6 specialty crop industry groups that we have staff. So our nursery trade industry probably has 3 staff, and those that are on the East Coast may be familiar with the MANTS program, the Mid-Atlantic Nursery Trade Show, and that's a fairly big nursery trade show, and so they have staff to run that trade show. But then while our state horticulture group, which includes some fruit and vegetable, they have a half-time person. And then we also have the Apple Promotion Board, the Mardel Watermelon Association. And so all of those groups are just volunteers. So what happens is the state, well, Maryland's Best is part of the state branding program. They will work with the industry groups to determine what is needed within the state. And so then what happens is then they put that into the application, which gets reviewed. So from a historical perspective, is usually we're looking at advertising campaigns, building relationship with wholesalers, our Maryland's Best Expo, and then the partnership with the Restaurant Association from Maryland is fairly new. But anyways, again, we through the specialty crop block grant, we do fund advertising campaigns, as I said, for social media, print, radio, and then also last year, to leverage some of the funds that we're bringing to the table, we worked with the Maryland Apple Promotion Board, and so then we combined the funding, and then we were able to do some social media and billboard campaigns. Again, with building relationship with wholesale and grocery stores, we provide the grocery stores with the point of sale materials, in-store signage, and then tastings. We work a lot with the Mardel Watermelon Association and bringing the queen in during the season, so then they could run the watermelon tastings within the grocery stores. And then our Maryland's Best Expo, it's a trade show that the department puts on, and that's just connecting farmers with the buyers. And so we have about between 80 to 100 farmers that will, purchase it, do a table, and it's essentially, in their marketing materials. And then we invite all the different buyers who might be interested in buying local from our farmers, from the Aramarks to the Sodexos to the grocery store chains, Harris Teeter, to ShopRite, to Klein's, to the local catering and restaurants. Then also, as I said, we work in partnership with the Restaurant Association of Maryland, and then with their golden tickets that focus on, it's vegetarian, but essentially we do a program in which there's a competition with the different chefs, and then they try to get a golden ticket to take down so they could compete into a competition in Texas, Dallas, Texas. So that seems to be very successful. Again, we're just trying to raise the awareness, as we all are, with trying, saying we have local food within our, we have local produce within our state. Next slide. So the other state project in which we fund is the food safety program. And so our food quality assurance program is responsible for training and for FSMA and for GAP, Maryland GAP and GIP. And so essentially we have a partnership with the Maryland Extension. And then we also have, it's a group that we work with. It's called the Ag Law Environmental Initiative, which is a Maryland-based program. And so they put on food safety trainings, and they provide resources and technical assistance to our farms for either FSMA or GAP certification, either USDA, and Maryland has an MDA GAP program in which we do follow the FSMA food safety rule. We like to say it's baby GAP or GAP in training. So what we're essentially doing with the MDA GAP or the Maryland GAP is creating a pipeline so we could show farmers or let farmers experience, doing food safety plans is not that intimidating, because when you try to say this is what you got to do, and if their buyers need a GAP certification, sometimes they get kind of put off by it. And so we like to say it's baby GAP, but again, but the rules do follow the FSMA food safety, and also it parallels GAP. We have seen some success stories in which the farmers who may be a farmer's market farmer, but then they decided to do wholesale, and their buyers is demanding GAP or USDA GAP. And so because they went through the training through MDA GAP, they're more comfortable saying, yes, I can do this. I can become USDA GAP or harmonized GAP. We also provide cost share for specialty crop producers who do want to implement food safety practices, technologies. And also we help offset the costs for getting those audits done. And that seems to has been very positive. And then also we provide environmental sampling to producers to evaluate how effective they are in terms of cleaning and sanitation. So those two, between Maryland's Best and Food Quality Assurance, they've been consistently submitting proposals on a regular basis. Next slide, please. And then our apiary inspection program, sometimes we will get applications from them, because we did pay for help offset the costs through specialty crop for the Maryland Pollinator Protection Plan, which was years ago. But that did set a precedence of like, okay, we need to do something with the bees and the pollinators and honey. So then, as you said, the honeybees do contribute, to $26 million to the produce sector. And so from there, what we're seeing is the parasite is really rampant within Maryland. And so talking to our apiary folks, they're like, what can we do? So they wanted to create best management practices. And then also we're providing monitoring kits for them. And so so that seems to be really well. The beekeepers have been really appreciative of the kits. And we're getting the information out in terms of best management practices. Next slide. I think, yeah, and that's it. And that's my contact name. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have about the program.
Thank you so much, Karen. I really do appreciate it.
Sure.
And we sincerely appreciate your contact information. If there's any questions that come my way, I'll forward them on to you. Otherwise, hopefully, if anybody has any questions, they'll reach out to you.
Okay, sure, no problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next state that I have to present is actually Michigan, and I have Alyssa and Janelle to present. Alyssa, Janelle, whichever one would like to go first, if you want to share your screen, and you can actually share the presentation yourself, or I can share it for you.
Can you hear me okay?
I can now, Janelle, yes.
Okay, great. I'm having audio issues, so I'm testing out some new earbuds here. So I appreciate everybody's patience. All right, Alyssa, if you don't mind, I'll just jump into it.
Go for it.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Not yet. It is starting. There you go.
Okay. All right. So Alyssa and I are both with the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, and we're both representing different programs within the department that is focused on agricultural marketing and business development in the state here. The program that I represent is the Michigan Craft Beverage Council, and this is a really unique program, I think, nationwide. In fact, I'm not even sure that there is another craft beverage council yet, although I know some states are talking about it. So I'm going to go into a little bit more about our council before I go into my presentation. All right, did the screen just flip? Is that what you're seeing, the what we do?
Yes, we see
Okay,
it.
great.
Yep.
All right, so the Craft Beverage Council, we are a 10-member governor-appointed board, and these board members all represent different industry types. And I receive no taxpayer dollars for this program. It's all funded by non-retail liquor license fees. So this is a program that is funded by the industry for the industry. And all of these different governor-appointed board seats represent different license types, which is sort of this weird relationship that I keep with the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. But so these license types might include large brewer, small brewer, large distiller, small distiller, a couple different winemakers, a winemaker that produces primarily cider, a retail seat, and a restaurant seat. All of these board members are advisory, and the department director, Tim Boring, is, or whoever is in that seat, is acting chairperson of the Michigan Craft Beverage Council. And so we were enacted into legislation in 2018, and from there, we definitely had some statute to look to for guidance, but we also had to make up like what is our benefit? How do we add value to this really dynamic industry? And so we found that we had four main ways to make an impact. One was to help promote relationships between the growers and the producers. So the wineries, cideries, craft distillers, and craft brewers. We also fund research. In fact, about half of my annual operating budget does go into research, and that can be into, for instance, halo blight and hops, or uh, different new varieties for cider apples. We also do grain research, wine grape research, a little bit of market research, that sort of thing. Under the craft category, I have pages to help with licensing information or different events and conferences and things that are taking place. And then, of course, the fourth category there is drink, the consumer, because if we don't have that end use, all the work we're doing is sort of in vain. So that's just a little bit of background about our program. I'm going to go into a project that fits into that grow category a little bit, and it helps with we're doing this research into the ag streams, but if we don't have an end user here, um, then it's falling a little short. So in order to bridge the gap, we know that a lot of times the let's say craft breweries or the wineries or whoever are saying, I'd really like to focus on some Michigan product, but I just don't know how to make those relationships with farmers, and I don't know where to find them. Um, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Here's a little background really quickly, and this is why it's important here for Michigan, because we're like a top 10 producer of everything. We're sixth in the nation for craft breweries. We're typically be first, second, or third for apples. I think we're second this year. We have a great acreage for vineyards, and we grow really high quality wine grapes, nice vinifera. This Great Lakes ecosystem helps us to grow really, really beautiful fruit forward acidic wine grapes. We are actually now sixth in the nation for craft distilleries. The hop acreage number here is probably a little bit misleading. There has been a lot of reduction in that. Still, with our reduced acreage, we are fourth in the nation for hop production and ninth in the nation for wine production. So the reason our craft beverage industry is so strong is because agriculture is the backbone of it in all ways. So I think that that's so amazing. I love that part of our industry very much. So anyway, back to we're making connections for growers and producers. And so we decided to create a craft beverage grower directory. And this is what we did with specialty crop block grant funds. Now, the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development does administer the specialty crop block grant. I don't have anything to do with that in my role other than, apply for it if something makes sense. So those there's not a lot of overlap between the colleagues that run that program and my program. So I applied in 2021, a little under $40,000, and we wanted to create this directory. And then we also wanted to spend some money promoting it. So this is just a snippet of the web page. And you can see here that, there are a couple different options. You can list your farm for free if you're a grower. Um, and then if you see the specialty crops here, not only can you pick wine grapes, but you can get pretty granular with the different varieties that you are offering. And then all of those items are also searchable on the other side. I do want to make mention here that you'll see that there's a category for grain, which obviously these are not specialty crops, but I'll go into that a little bit more in just a minute. I might come back and try to show you the video, but I'm not positive that it's going to come out. So I'm going to skip it for now. So here's another snippet of our grower directory. So we have the specialty crops here and then the grains. And I think, I definitely got permission from USDA to do this and was very specific about the language. I worked with them. So I would say anybody that is writing any sort of a grant like this, your best bet is open communication. So, I told them we are going to build this out with our own separate funds, and they just advise on the language. So everything is fine. And I think that this is also important because it showed that the work that the specialty crop block grant did for like helping us to develop this website also served as a launching pad for us to make our own investments into it and continue to develop it further. I think it's also important to look here that we were able to add in the farm categories so that if somebody is searching for, let's say, a grape grower that's women owned, they're able to do that. And I think that that's not only important for our end user, but also for the metrics that we can capture. And then these groups can also search by keyword and, all sorts of different things. So this is just what that looks like. And then I also wanted to show you another way that we expanded it. I worked with our ArcGIS specialist at the department to translate that information that we exported from our farm directory into a map. And we have these cute little icons that she came up with. And it's just another way for, a business to be able to identify what they're looking for and what's close to them. So obviously they can search for something within, 25 miles of their home or 50 or 150, whatever. And this is just another way that we were able to, again, thank the money that came into us to do this project with further investments on our part. I think that's all I have for you now. I am going to try to go back and show this video. If the audio doesn't come through, don't worry about it because it's just like stock, um, you know, just stock music, but it shows a little bit about, in order to be able to get the information out about this program, we wanted to make sure that we're linking to it a lot on social media. We have a really good following of industry members, and so we pitch this to growers, we pitch this to the craft beverage producers, everywhere along the supply chain. So let me see if this, oh, I'm on the wrong screen. Hold on just a moment. I'm going to start it over here. Okay, so that is my presentation. Do we want to save questions till the end, or does anybody have anything for me right now?
Yes, we will save questions till the end.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Alyssa, if you want to share your screen, you can go ahead and do that. And if you have issues, just let me know. I can share mine as well.
See if it lets me. It doesn't seem to want to let me share.
I can go ahead and try if you want me to try.
That would be great.
Okay. All right. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. Just whenever you're ready, just let me know to flip the slide, okay?
Sounds great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Muchler. I work for the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development in their international marketing program. There are two of us that kind of run the program, and then we have a new program manager. So we're really excited about that right now. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've kind of used specialty crop block grant funding. We are very much kind of the same way that Marilyn spoke about how they have to apply. So we do apply on an annual basis for specialty crop block grant funding from our grants team to try to get some funding each year to use with the for our specialty crops here in Michigan. Next slide, please. So we have several specialty crops here in Michigan, which is really diverse and really fun to work with. We work with several of these commodity groups on an extensive basis. So like apple, asparagus, cherry, dry bean, and they get to work with us on putting the application together when we apply. We meet at least once a year to kind of find out, hey, what went well last year? What are new things that are trending? And like, what do you guys want to do? So we work extensively with these groups to put together an application that is competitive and really serves what they're looking for. Next slide, please. We have utilized specialty crop block grant funding for, I would say, 10 plus years. I've been with the program 2 years, so definitely have not done all of these things, but some consistent things that we do now are international and domestic trade shows. And the domestic trade shows that we do qualify for USDA as an international show. We've been working extensively on some promotional videos in recent years with the commodity groups. We previously brought in buyers, international buyers here to Michigan to meet with the commodity groups and meet with growers so they can kind of show like, this is what it takes to grow, a Michigan apple. And this is why we want people to purchase Michigan apples outside of the US. We've also spent specialty crop grant funds on export reports that we've been able to give to our commodity groups. We've hosted several export seminars, and we've used some of the funding just to create marketing materials that the commodity groups or MDARD can use at various events that we're all at throughout the years. Next slide, please. So these are kind of the big trade shows we've been working on in the last few years. The National Restaurant Association show. We always have at least one commodity group from Michigan that attends that show with one of our team members. So they get a chance to kind of show, like this one is Michigan potatoes. Like, why should you buy a Michigan potato? What can we use it for? And then every other year we do either CL Paris or we go to Anuga in Cologne, Germany. And we typically have one team member that goes and represents all the commodity groups, but we try to take one commodity group with us to kind of have that one person there from that commodity group that can speak, extensively on, the cherry. We can only do so much. We know just a little of what all of our people know. So we try to help where we can, but they're the ultimate experts. And another show we've been attending is the Global Produce and Floral Show. And that's been a good one for us as well. Next slide, please. So some different things that we've been working on is these promotional videos. And so what we've done is we work with a contractor here in Michigan that will put together the video projects for us. And we work from start to finish with the commodity groups and in this video company. And the commodity groups get as much control kind of as they want. We are there to kind of steer things and make sure we're following what needs to be followed for the grant and following through on what we need to collect. But it's kind of theirs, like, what do you need the video for? So this one is from Michigan Asparagus, and I'm hoping it will play. So Michigan Asparagus chose to do 30-second little ads on social media. You can go ahead and play it. Yes, so Michigan Asparagus kind of chose very specific things they wanted to talk about. They really wanted to focus on local. So we did a 30-second video on local. And we talked about like health and those kind of things. So it really truly was what they wanted and what they thought would help to sell more Michigan asparagus. So a lot of our promotion is for the domestic side as well. The great thing is like something like this we can use on social media. We can put it on websites. We can take it with us to trade shows. So it's a really nice tool for us to have. Next slide, please. So Michigan Cherry also recently did a video with us. And theirs was a little more full length of a video is what they tried to go for, and kind of encapsulate like how do we start growing a cherry and how does it wind up like in your food as something you would eat. So it's fun for me to get out and go with these guys for a few days because we get to go visit these farms and, watch cherry harvest, which is such a unique thing to get to go see here in Michigan. And we love getting to do it. So just like getting to get on these farms, like I am understanding more and we're getting to promote these products every day. You can go ahead and play this one. All right, next slide, please. The last videos that we worked on this year took a little bit of extra selling on my end to the department to kind of make sure that we could do it. Michigan Potato wanted to do humorous videos, which have been a hit so far. They're so fun. They're so fun to make and like to watch them now. They're very entertaining. So I had pulled one today. And I'm happy to share these with anybody after so you guys can hear the volume on these. We hired local talent for this, which was just crazy to me to know that like we had this kind of talent in Michigan and be able to, truly have a full Michigan production. So So if you want to play it, you can't hear it, but all right, next slide, please. Just want to thank everybody for their time today. I greatly appreciate it. And I can share my contact info as well if anybody has any questions that don't get answered today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate your presentation. I got to hear the audio on the videos, so the potato was adorable. um, now, the next state that we have is Texas, and I have Kat and Casey on for us. Kat, if you want to, do you want to see if you can share your screen for us?
Yep, I will give it a whirl. Let me try here. Okay. Okay, can you see it? Did it pop up?
Yep, we got it.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. It is our pleasure to be here today. My name is Kat Nielsen. I'm with the Texas Department of Agriculture, and I'm here with my colleague, Casey Corley, with our marketing department. And I will let him give more details about what he does when we get to his part of the presentation. But I am a lead grant specialist here at the department. And one of the programs I specifically oversee is the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. So my role is a little bit different than lots of the other folks you've been hearing today because I am actually the one who administers our Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we manage and how we run our program, and then Casey is going to get in some specifics about some state-led projects that he oversees and does in his role. So Texas has been part of the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program since its inception in 2008. We have always had at least one, if not more, TDA internal project each year. It varies from year to year how many we have. Over the existence of the program, we've actually done a total, I did the count, of 44 total internal projects that have ranged the multitude of diversity of projects, that have benefited Texas and our specialty crop industry. So we have five key focus areas that Texas has prioritized. Nutrition. I'm going to hold on just a minute. Okay, there we go. Now I can see my entire screen. So we have nutrition projects, food safety, marketing, plant health, value added, and industry development. Each of these pillars have been identified through stakeholder engagement. This is through surveys, it's through liaison work with our commodity groups to make sure that the projects that we're funding are, meaningful to our industry, that fall into these key areas that the agency deems as important, for our specialty crop industry, and ensuring that we make our specialty crops, stay competitive on the national and international market as well. Sorry, I forgot that I had put in all this other stuff. Um, so, so one thing I will say about our key focus areas is that, when we do receive, this is obviously a competitive grant program for us. We do receive in between about to 1.2 to 1.4 million dollars every year. It does fluctuate. We are obviously one of the largest states to receive the largest amount of funding because it's based on, as I know some of our other states talked about, it is a formula that's based on the amount of specialty crop acreage and the sales receipts. But each of our projects that are submitted are, they have to identify which of these key focus areas their project is in, and they're reviewed in those categories by subject matter experts. A marketing project is going to be reviewed by marketing experts, where a plant health or value added, which has to do more usually with research or disease management, those are going to be reviewed by experts in those areas. When we do our final selections, we do make sure that we have projects from all of our five different key focus areas, as well as making sure that we have a diversity in our commodity groups as well. So we're not just focusing on funding pecans or just focusing on uh, citrus. We do really try to make sure that not only our biggest industries are represented, but even some of our smaller industries like blueberries and strawberries. TDA internal projects also always fall under these five categories. Um, I will say most of the time it's marketing, sometimes it's food safety, sometimes it's nutrition. We do not do very many research projects. Actually, we've never done any research projects because we let our universities take the lead on those types of activities. They are those experts. Um, so our competitive process. Um, we release our RFGA, our request for grant applications, back in November of December, and it's due in January. This is about an entire year before a project would actually start, and that's just because of the process and the length of time it takes between our competitive process at the state level and then sending it on for the USDA for their approval. The internal projects complete applications just the same as any external applicant. Our team of, the folks that throughout TDA that would like to apply for it, they have access to me as a grant specialist, which can help assist them in their application. But as far as writing it and submitting it, that is what they do, and that is on their own. The TDA grant specialist, we obviously conduct our administrative review to make sure that everything is there. And this goes for all of our applications. Same thing with our internal applicants. They have to submit all the same documentation, any required materials that we require for anybody else, they also need to do. So then they are reviewed and scored by an external review committee. And then the final selection, again, I kind of touched on this in my last slide, but they are, we at TDA make the final selection. It is a combination, use the total scores from our reviewers. Again, it's spread out between the key focus areas and a variety of the Texas commodities. Other things that we consider are the risk assessment score, previous project utilization rate, previous performance, and then, of course, agency priorities. So once our projects are selected, our internal projects are monitored in the same manner as external projects. So that means that they submit TDA quarterly performance reports just as any of our external projects would. And then they also complete the annual and final reports that are required by the USDA. They are also required to track those outcome indicators, just as anybody else would have to, and make sure that, they've got the data to support it, and, make sure that they're tracking and have the backup documentation for that data, just like anybody else. As a grant specialist, I work with our internal teams to ensure that their expenses and activities are in line with approved project profile and budget. This is just to ensure continuity, to ensure, transparency. That's the word I'm looking for. Just to make sure that our projects are in line with what is allowable, and make sure that we are performing the projects that we say that we're going to. Another thing that we do as for our internal projects is the budget. So one thing that I have heard is that, how do you separate, the budgets and keeping it all, separate so that you're tracking it. I mean, our TDA Finance, we create an internal budget to make sure that each of our internal projects is allocated correctly and that it's every penny, that's using the grant funds is tracked. And then but then we also, I mean, we split out all these things. We split out the grants administration, we split out the sub awards, which are external projects, which then as the grant specialist, I oversee every single one of those external projects as well. We break out the indirect, we break out the personnel fringe, and then in this example, I've also said we break out the marketing project and then our produce safety project. Um, so with this, this is something, that finance does, but then even on program level, I also maintain all of the expense tracking for each of these so that we are sure that we're allocating our specialty crop block grant funds correctly. So when we report to the USDA, we've got accurate numbers for what's being spent on our grants administration, like all of these different categories, but keeping those marketing projects, keeping those internal projects separate, and so we can report on each one. Um, Here are some examples of past TDA internal projects. I'm just gonna, yeah, I mean, you can read them, but they 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 they're very diverse, all the way from our produce safety department, wash your produce, produce safety begins with you, our marketing team with promoting special crops now and in the future. We have our marketing team for wine and grapes. That's her Vine to Wine education program promotion. We've also had our food and nutrition department. They applied a few years ago and received funding for a bridging the leadership gap in Texas. They were putting on they were trying to find ways to promote leadership and nutrition and provide resources for their schools. So those are just some examples. And I'm now actually going to pass it over to Casey.
Hey everyone, Casey Corley. I'm the Special Crop Program Specialist for the Department of Ag here in Texas, where Kat handles the actual grant side of things. I handle the actual project side of things. As she said, I do have to apply myself. It's not always the funnest process, but Kat makes it a lot easier than it could be if I was on my own. So I thank her a lot for that. Um, as a program specialist, I identify my job not as going out and finding projects I think are cool, but as going out and finding projects that are one needed in the industry, and then also are directives of the department for the special crop industry here in Texas. Um, with that, Texas has over 125 million acres in ag production across the state. We have over 260 different crops, and I try to get to as many of them as I can, especially in the specialty crop industry. It can be difficult, but as I've heard from some of the other states, when you work with the associations that represent your crops, it's a lot easier. It's a lot smaller room, a lot less voices to have to hear. And it makes the job as a specialty crop program specialist a lot easier. In that, I'll go through some of the steps that I have to go through as a specialist and kind of what I've seen in my experience. I will say the number one thing that I've seen is being a good liaison to the industry is crucial. You have to be able to listen to the producers and hear what they're needing and not just saying, oh, well, this seems like something that would be fun for us to do. So first off, applying, as Kat said, we have to do it ourselves. We expect our industry folks to do it. We need to be able to do it as well. Um, we do the same process as they do. That actually also helps for when they have questions. They can come to me as their liaison and say, hey, Casey, I'm applying for this grant. What do I need to do for this? What are the steps that I can go through? I don't write it for them. That's not allowed, but I will give them best practices and just kind of the steps that I go through. Always start early. We all work for departments of ag. It's a slow process. Anything in government is. So starting early always helps not only ourselves, but it can also help people like Kat, who maybe we'll have them review, or maybe we'll be missing some. She has to tell me, hey, Casey, you forgot to sign this. that happens a lot more often than I care to admit. Always take department and industry stakeholder input in equally. Here at the department, we have a great team that really does care about our producers, but we also have a lot of producers that we have to listen to. Uh, Going out to the conferences, going out to their association meetings, or just calling them up independently and saying, hey, what is it that the spinach industry in Texas needs this year? What is it that the citrus industry is really looking for the next 5 years? That has a big impact not only on your project because maybe you included something that wasn't needed, but it can also be a great influence of, okay, I'm getting a lot of now we need social impact moving forward, or maybe we need more commercials and videos put out there. It can greatly shape the way that the projects are kind of structured. When applying, check, check, and check again. Just because someone says something one time doesn't mean that that's their full thought. Or just because you thought you filled it out one way doesn't mean that you ended up with that same project. I know this past year I actually started, I think in October because I kind of had the template from previous years. And by December, it was an entirely different project, but I still had a paragraph for the original. Make sure you're checking the application as you're going through. Make sure that the projects you're writing out are still what you want to do, especially in the budget portion. Events change, costs change. Maybe you're going to work with different contractors. Make sure that you're constantly checking the entire application just so the finished product is what you're really thinking that it's going to be. And then also submit early through your internal process. I always like to try to give at least 2 to 3 weeks by the time it's in our system and applied for our internal team to be able to make changes before the final say of, hey, this is the deadline. What that does is not only gives me kind of more incentive to make sure it's done early, but also gives them time to, if there's department changes, if there's something that just has to get added last minute, or just if there's anything that needs to be changed, it gives that time for it to be done. So yeah, I know that's kind of focusing on do it early and make sure you're listening to people, but that really does make the process a lot easier, especially for me as a specialist. Um, some best practices when you're applying, always focus on the big picture. Like I said, here in Texas, we have over 260 different crops. If I focus on one of them, that's not fair. If I said for 1 year, my entire project is going to be just pecans, and trust me, they're easy to work with. Uh, it wouldn't be fair to the vegetable folks. It wouldn't be fair to people across the state of saying, hey, well, you're only doing pecans this year. Kind of having more of a broad aspect really does kind of make sure that the entire agricultural industry is helped and not just one specific group, which is part of why I say focus on diversifying the crops and focus. Not only do you not want to have just one crop, but you also don't want to stay in one area. If you make an entire project specifically designed for social media ads, that kind of takes away any ability to be flexible and go into other projects that may come up that might be necessary. If you do entire one for trainings that maybe the industry needs, but then it comes time to it and there's this really great opportunity to do a promotion, international promotion, but you didn't write it in, kind of makes it really difficult. You have to go through a whole amendment process. You have to really work to kind of rework the budgets. So making sure that when you're thinking about doing these projects, that not only you're doing multiple crops, but that you're doing multiple assets of marketing, kind of help to make sure that when the time comes, like Kat said, we basically plan this out over a year in advance. When the time comes, you want to be able to do those things and not have to go through a whole amendment process because I did one when I first started, and I hope I never have to do one again. Um, Also, expect costs to go up year after year. I don't think I've seen anything from ad space to conference booths to even design fees that have stayed the same in the past 3 years. It's things are going to get more expensive every year. If you can talk to people and they give you estimates ahead of time, great. But know that it's going to be about a year before that end project actually starts. So they may go up maybe 3%, maybe 5%. I've seen one of my conferences, I think, went up 10% in 1 year. And that sometimes just the state of industry changes, and sometimes maybe a group needs more for their booth spaces. So just be aware of those costs kind of changing and plan it in your budget. Next slide, please. So ending with zero. So before my career here at TDA, I started with USDA for an ag service, and I got to see what happens sometimes when some of the money comes back. As we all know, with Specialty Crop Program Block Grant, if we don't spend it as the states, it will go back to USDA. And I don't know about y'all, but I kind of enjoy spending money on my producers and projects, and it's a lot of fun. So I don't want to end up with any money at the end of the project. I want to spend all of it that I can. So every year I try to make sure whatever funds are about to be going out get spent before they can. Doing that, I try to utilize excess funds for some of the smaller projects. Um, there's always going to be, here in Texas, there's always like the olive industry is always going to ask for a little bit more ad space around their processing time. The um, citrus industry is always going to want some kind of promotion internationally. There's always some small little deal. It's probably going to be under $10,000 each time. Just keep a list of those things. Every state I know has those different groups that are constantly coming to us saying, hey, we'd really like to do this or we'd really like to do that. Just write it down. That's what I do. At my desk, I have a portfolio that has a different list of all the different projects that people have asked me for that range anywhere from, oh, we just want a new banner for our association to we want to do an entire inbound trade mission where we're going to host 20 plus buyers. Um, Not all of those are ever going to happen, but just having them written down and being able to say, okay, when we have these excess funds that we really want to spend, here's how we can do that. And that way you're not racking your brain trying to figure out, okay, how do I spend all this money? It just makes it a lot easier. Part of that as well, when you're applying for the grant internally, make sure you include that verbiage for items such as printing or advertisement. Um, Reason we do that is one, to make sure that if we want have anything in the grant terms that need to be printed, such as swag items or informational pamphlets, or if advertisement, I mean, we all do some sort of advertisement with our grants. Um, Making sure that those are included straight off the bat, make it a lot easier on the back end so that we don't have to write in new line items or uh, do extra justification for why we're doing a certain part of a project. So always want to end with zero. Like I said, just keep that list together and make sure that when you're writing the grant, you are thinking about, hey, there are going to be smaller things down the road, and just include that kind of verbiage. Next grant, please. So these are some of the projects that I personally have seen be more worth it, um, both with the main project and those side projects that I kind of mentioned. Um, all of these, like I said, I asked the industry, okay, what is it you need? Then also two, what is it you've seen that's really had value to you as the industry? Um, Industry specific trainings is one of the best ones. We started doing a couple, I think 2 years ago now. And since then, every time we do one, I get a flood of emails saying, hey, we really love doing this. Can we do this for this? Can we do this kind of training for this industry? Or someone from a whole different industry, hey, you did that for them. Can we have one as well? Those are always appreciated. Online resources, anything that can be shared with the mass group of people, whether it's educational information on your industries, whether it's um, practices for producers or harvesters, it's always appreciated by the people, and making it online always makes it easier to distribute. That way, instead of having to have a whole bunch of printed pamphlets, could send someone the link or have a QR code with you so that they can see more information. In-store merchandising and influencers kind of go along the same thing of just bringing people more to your producers, whether it's for a trade show or in local grocery stores. Anything that can highlight your industry is always appreciated by the producers. Side projects, event participation. I think I go to about 20 trade shows a year. And that's so that I can meet with all of the producers around Texas. It is fun. It's exhausting sometimes, but it's always worth it because not only does that help them because hey, your Department of Ag is participating in your trade show. They're here talking with us. They get a lot out of that, but it also gives us feedback on how things are going with our different grants. Um, Educational and promotional materials, both design and print. Those are expensive items. We all like having swag for our initiatives. Love having some kind of educational piece anywhere I go. I know this past, I think about a week ago, I was at the Global Organic Produce Expo and I brought a piece about Texas honey. Now, I just kind of was something I threw in the bag, but I actually had someone pick up, I didn't know you had honey in Texas. I was like, yeah. That piece was made possible by the Special Crop Block Grant. And so having little pieces like that, maybe it's a pamphlet, maybe it's a card, just something that can help promote your industry is always good. And then industry advertisements. There's countless ways that you can advertise, whether it's with like produce business or with the trade show publications or just with local newspapers or industry uh, catalogs. The possibilities are endless. But as you see kind of highlighted here, ask your stakeholders, they'll let you know what they want and they'll let you know kind of what the industry needs. Next slide. So these are projects I personally try to avoid. There's various reasons, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them afterwards about why I avoid certain ones. Um, some simple reasons, brand specific promotions, we're not allowed to. Needs to be for the entire industry. Print advertisements as a main project, I try to avoid those just because it's something that's going to reach a limited number of people. And if it's, say, if something in a newspaper, I personally don't get the metrics that I like to see out of it. So I always try to avoid them. Same with radio. I just have not had good history of trying to get good metrics out of it. Um, Billboards, same thing, is anything that's kind of limited in its scope. Try to make sure that you're seeing, okay, what's the big picture here? What's my ROI on this? And then anything that's comparative campaigns. Um, we've seen before some projects that try to get applied for it, where people try to say, oh, well, we're better than so and so. State departments, we don't want to do that. We're not here to be competitive with each other or any industry. So it's always making sure that we focus on, hey, this is our industry. It's here. It's great. Make sure everyone knows about it. So that's just kind of stuff that I would avoid. If you want to talk any more about projects that you kind of wonder what's the benefit versus why would you want to avoid it, please feel free to contact me. Always happy to go over some ideas with people. Next slide. And that's it. That's our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions about how we do things here in Texas. And thanks for letting us speak to y'all.
Thank you, Kat and Casey. Casey, I don't know if you remember me, but I met you in October. And since I met you in October, I have emailed you so many questions. You are amazing. And I just want to say thank you to both of you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anna. Hope you're coming next PMA.
Oh, you'll see me. You'll see me.
All right, I think we are ready for question and answer. If we could stop screen share, we'll pop everybody back up and we'll do this. You can raise your hand if you want, or just unmute yourself and ask a question for any of our presenters. Or if you would want to share something that might be a benefit of the group, we'll welcome that too.
So this is Karen from Maryland. I was able to stay a little bit longer, but I had a question for Kat, because your process is very similar to Maryland's. But I was wondering, do you give an agreement to the internal projects, like a grant agreement, or do you just track it
No,
through your own mechanisms, like the expenditures and stuff?
yeah, no, we don't do a formal agreement internally, like with our external, of course we do. But they do receive the same type of guidance, monitoring and expectations that our externals, same documents, same everything. They might hear from me more often. I poke them. I don't hear from them, but yeah, of
No, thank you. Yes, that was very helpful. So thanks.
course.
Joe?
Yeah, I had a question for any and all of the speakers. What do you find to be successful ways to encourage people to do their annual reports timely, or what punitive measures do you have in place to get them to do it on time, or if they don't do it on time, how do you know, is there a punishment?
So that's a really
I'm
good
happy.
question.
Oh,
Oh, that's a really good question. And surprisingly, I find internal projects not listening to me in terms of deadline as opposed to the external subgrantees. And so what I haven't had to do any punishment per se, but again, it's just the communication saying you're this is the deadline, this is when it's due, please, it helps everybody if you get your grant agreements, your grant reports in on time. I haven't had to go down that road in terms of, you didn't give me a grant, you didn't send me in a report. I did have one application that the PI just moved and didn't tell me, and I worked with the USDA on how to resolve that issue there.
yeah, for our internal projects, I've been rather fortunate that most of our leads on those projects are very, very responsive. And I do need to send reminders to them. And if I don't, I mean, if I don't, then I'm like, I probably because they're also very busy. But we also go through revisions. I do a read through and ask for revisions if need be. But then of course USDA then also asks for revisions. So internally I've been pretty lucky. Externally. We definitely have some external projects, grantees that, it's kind of like pulling teeth a little bit sometimes. I start reminders very early. If I don't receive it, then we start to actually withhold fund reimbursements. All of our grants work on a reimbursement basis, and that is usually the easiest type of, hey, we're not going to refund your next payment reimbursement request until we receive these reports. We do ask for the reports very early. We require them to be in November 1st, which gives me nearly 2 months to either track them down or then also to review them and get them uploaded to the USDA. So having a lot of time helps.
Yeah, we typically try to include some language when we start asking for those reports at the end. Something like failure to submit this in timely fashion may I forget, may hinder future awards or something like that. Just so that if we do hold them up the next year, we can say, look, you didn't submit your stuff on time. You were a month late. So, you got to draw the line somewhere. And I appreciate your input for ways to track them down. Thank you.
There was a question asked in the chat box by Laura. She says, similar to the craft project, has anyone else created projects that have also benefited non-specialty crop industries, and how have you dealt with that?
Right, so I'll jump in. We have done that in the past. We haven't done it recently, and it's a challenge. It has been helpful when they switched over, when they dropped solely, because specialty crop used to have this term solely enhance the competitiveness of specialty crop, and then when they dropped that word, that did open up things a little bit. But we look at the percentages. Okay, we know that 50% of this, 50% of the project will benefit specialty crop, or should say, let's go back to the trade show. That we know that we have non-specialty crop producers at our expo, and then we'll have specialty crop producers. But we know historically 50% of the people that come to the expo will be specialty crop producers. And so we ask, if the trade, let's say if the expo costs $10,000, then we'll ask like for 5,000 for the specialty crop producers element. I don't know how other states do. I mean, that has been accepted from USDA when we look at a percentage, because I know USDA sometimes they kind of get funny about funding non-specialty crop projects when it's commingled with a specialty crop project.
Texas has done a similar thing just recently. It's a percentage. But you're right, when they dropped that solely language out of there, I think it made it a lot easier.
Yeah.
And we just a percentage of it is paid with outside funds for specialty crop. Mhm.
Yeah.
What other questions do we have? Feel free to just unmute yourself and ask away. I see. Oh, go right ahead, Caroline. I think you're muted.
Caroline, you're still muted. We can't hear you.
Caroline, if you want to drop your question in the chat, I'll read it for you. There's a lot of familiar names on this call. I know a lot of you are really creative in your use of specialty crops. Does anybody want to unmute and tell us about one of their favorite projects they used internally? Give us some inspiration. I'll let you all think about that while I read Caroline's question. She would love to hear how people got input from the industry. We've done a few surveys, but it feels like we're reaching the same people and would love to build more connections with other industry groups. Great question, Caroline. Anybody want to jump on and talk about how they reach out to their industry and get unique input?
I can step in just kind of as Texas liaison. The best way that I get input from the industry is going to the industry events, whether it's a association trade show or field days with our land grant university or with different boards that we have for our industries across the state. Actually going and being there in person, you get a lot more personal feel, not only for what really matters to the industry, but then also who are the players, who's going to be asking for what. And that just kind of gives you a more in-depth look. As far as finding new industries, it can also be helpful to go and because you never know who's going to be there. I know I was at Texas Pecan Growers Association when the president of Texas Peach Growers Association came up to talk to me. Um, just making sure that you're there and available for them. I've done surveys in the past. Typically, I get kind of a low response rate on them, and then usually it's kind of uh, less personal, less in depth about what's going on. But making sure that you're there and available for them is always crucial. After doing it for a couple of years, it's gotten to the point where I have some of the producers will call me on the phone, even on the weekends, to discuss ideas and things that they'd really like to see in the industry. So just making sure you're available and known to them would probably be the best thing to do.
I agree with Casey. That's what we've also done too. We now as I mentioned earlier, it's the winter months here, and so our farmers are constantly meeting. There, between extension, the land grant universities and the workshops or the trade shows that we're having, and so we are out there all the time talking to them. We need to do surveys and. Response rate, it could be decent at times. I guess it depends on what the subject matter is, but between our secretary, he does a lot of visits to the farms, and also that trickles down through the department. Because we're always talking to the farmers out there. and finding out what's going on.
We're actually a little different in Michigan. Pretty much all of our commodity groups, specialty crop wise, have at least an executive director. Some of them have several staff people, and we're really fortunate in that aspect. So they are so in tune to what their producers need that we have very open lines of communication with them to kind of figure out what they need, what they don't need, and we work with them in that respect. We're always happy to travel out and excited when we get to get a day out of the office, but most of the time we're working extensively with those executive directors.
All right, who's been ruminating on their favorite projects they want to share with the group? Allison? Oh, sorry, I thought that was a hand up. Nope. I know somebody's dying to share a favorite project.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm Minnesota grown. So I have more of a question, but for Casey and Elisa, if you could talk a little bit about um, are you both applying for and administering all of the different projects that you're doing? And I think my question is, how do you think about doing one larger project versus I like that diversity idea, Casey, that you talked about within both the product and the kind of the media. So we've gone from doing, we're going to use all of our specialty crop funding for sponsored search ads, right, in the past to now we're doing, okay, we've got this much for influencers and this much for social media. We did a little bit of print and a little bit of this and that. And it actually, now that I'm implementing them, I'm finding it a little overwhelming that I actually have 4 projects, 5, 6, because I have the 2022 project and the 2023 project that are all happening at the same time. So just if you have tips or advice on how you've handled that.
So for me, I typically try to keep it one big project with 3 small projects or 2 small projects. And usually at least one of those 2 small projects will be some kind of educational or promotional piece, whereas the other one is something that may have been just asked for from industry that I thought kind of deserved its own side project within the main grant. Um, I'll say I definitely have a interesting budget Excel sheet that I make sure that kind of keeps track of it. And in applying for the grant, we have to do our working plan. I assume kind of everyone has the same kind of process of making sure the project application has the 3-year work plan. In doing it, I make sure that the big project isn't due till the very end, but has little pieces that are coming out each quarter. Whereas the small projects, one of them I typically want to be done within the first 2 quarters of the grant. And that way, instead of having 4 main projects at one time, oh, I've got this one big one that I'm working on, and then this one small one that I need to get done by the end of half the year. So that kind of helps me out. I definitely get what you're saying. I have 3 grants as well right now, and it gets to be a little overwhelming, but just trying to make sure that you keep pace with, okay, here's what I'm working on now, and making sure that those smaller projects get done quickly. It makes it to where they don't stack as much. So I know when I first started, I had, I think at one point, 6 main projects that I was trying to keep track of, and that was not very fun. But by now I've gotten it to where, okay, here's the main project I need to do within the next year. Here's the one I need to have for the next 6 months, and here's the one I have for the next 3 months. And so that helps. It makes it a lot less stressful.
I would say that in New Jersey we have an interesting setup as well. I mean, one thing I certainly have learned from NAAMO is that we all do things a little bit differently. And in New Jersey, we have a state board of agriculture, which sort of governs and sets policy for the department. The state board of agriculture is an 8 grower member with 2 new people every year and 2 people going off every year. They have a grants committee as part of that. So we have online here today our grants coordinator, Billy Connors, who sends out the RFP. We get in bids, and then 51% of the funding that we get from specialty crop goes to subgrantees, and 49% stays within the Department of Agriculture. And that 49% is a overarching marketing campaign that has different elements and different things every year. Whether we add podcasts or airplane banners along the shoreline, or digital billboards, which change every week with commodities throughout the season. But then we see a lot of special projects come in through commodity councils, through educational institutions, Rutgers University, Rowan, at Stockton have put in bids. And so we try, as Casey said, to have both commodity diversity, geographic diversity, and then research and marketing diversity in the awards. And our state Board of Agriculture Grants Committee makes the ultimate decision on that. So we'll see a different mix every year, but the department, that's a lot of what funds the department's marketing efforts every year. And yes, so we'll have like 14 subgrantees, and then our main grant times 3 for the 3 years. So it's a lot of reports and a lot of paperwork for sure.
Looks like we're just about at our 3:30 time. I am happy to keep the Zoom open for anybody who wants to continue chatting. One more call. Anybody want to share an inspiring project? We're all just here to learn today, right? Well, feel free to jump in. But I want to say thank you so much to Hannah for organizing our speakers. And thank you, speakers, for taking your time out of your day and creating those presentations and sharing. I think there will be a lot of connections going on. We will share the recording, and a few people sent some documents that we can share. And then, of course, you can always find states on our NAAMO website. To make a contact. That is what we are here for. Or if you wanted to know somebody specific today, you can reach out to us as well. We really appreciate everyone taking their time and hanging out with us. Don't forget, we are going to have a lot of fun in New Jersey this summer. And if you haven't been to an NAAMO before, I promise you won't regret it. If you have been, we can't wait to see you again. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.